Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. I know you guys were big fans of the last video I did with Crypto Fiend about Unibright. So today I have a special couple of guests on the channel from Unibright, the co-founders, Marten and Stefan. So welcome, guys. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Unibright's one of these projects that's really getting a lot of buzz these days. There's a lot of, developments coming out, new videos are coming out about it. But I wanted to go back to the beginning and ask you guys how Unibright got started. Like, what inspired this project for you?
Okay, so that's already some years ago. I mean, we're techies. We love technology. We've always helped companies build on new technologies. And then when we came about blockchain a few years ago, we somehow felt that it can be used in enterprise processes and enterprise environments as well. We started looking into it, and then we just saw the huge potential of blockchain and of what we already did, and then we combined everything and came up with Unibright, with the whole idea of helping enterprises make use of blockchains.
Awesome. So I would guess it's safe to say that both your backgrounds, at least in some way, are related to enterprise tech, and you have some intimate experience with how technology is adopted in enterprise.
Yeah, totally. So I mean, the line we put also under the logo is blockchain-based business integration. And if you just take the business integration part, you actually see what we've done the 15 years before founding Unibright. Mm-hmm. So connecting IT systems of different companies, making use of new technology and integrating it into the existing processes and tech stack. Mm-hmm. So in the very beginning, when we started to look into blockchain, for us, it felt in the beginning just like another technology. But then the deeper you dive into the subject, the more potential you see. And that's why we also decided to have a dedicated startup with Unibright with this blockchain scene and blockchain environment and ecosystem. Yeah. And it's already been some developments since then, but it comes out of our history as business integrators.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So then again, I think it would be fair to say that Unibright's core mission is probably to drive enterprise adoption of blockchain technology, and not just that, but the more complicated underpinnings of it, like tokenization and just deep business integration with existing ERP systems and CRMs, et cetera. Would that be fair?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great summary. I mean, fast forward from where we started, that's exactly the two pillars we are working on. I mean, enterprise blockchain adoption all around the EEA and baseline. This is something that came quite naturally, and everything about tokenization, that's just the second pillar. I mean, this is where crypto just started and made a lot of sense with all the tokens and ICOs and so. And now we have both of those fields we're working on, mostly on a technical level, but now we are building networks, helping companies make use of it. So it's these great two fields we feel very positive on.
Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
I think it's also in the nature of when you start up in a new technology, that driving the adoption is part of your work. So, of course, in the beginning, we tackled it more from the tech side, deciding what products will be needed by enterprises if they want to make use of blockchain technology. This is where the Unibright framework came from. But the more you dive into the space and the more your ecosystem grows, the more you also get into the role of driving adoption for the complete ecosystem. So this is also something where Frequency, for example, our tokenization stuff came out because it's a very good use case for blockchain. Yeah. And we do not only want to sit and wait for adoption to happen, driven by others, but want to be an active part of driving adoption.
Yeah, I think you're right on this, and especially when you look at it, we went one step before, so to say, one step back in adding workshops to our portfolio. We learned at some stage that there still are companies out there that don't have a clue on what to make out of blockchain and how they can somehow use it within their enterprise environment. And then we had these workshops, and they really, was something that was missing helping companies get a feeling on what is possible with this technology. So there's still this huge gap that you somehow have to help them get over.
Absolutely. And I think it's probably hard to reconcile, at least in my experience, the fact that a lot of enterprises, they want to try and adopt blockchain, or they want to make strategic investment in it for their business, but they have no idea where to start, or they're doing it backwards, right? They're saying we have blockchain, now let's just try and hit every problem we have with it until we find one that works, when instead these workshops are probably helpful to help clients, for enterprise in your case, figure out what are the problems that you already have that blockchain can solve, so you're not wasting your money. And I think that's the biggest thing for enterprise.
Absolutely. And that's when you look at the EA, for example, Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, I mean, we're working there on use cases. They have a dedicated group looking at use cases. And next week we have this demo with Baseline where we have a dedicated use case, something within the scope of supply chains. But still, you have to have a use case to show people what you can build.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned it just now, and that's the Baseline protocol. You guys are, significant contributors to that, along with plenty of other entities, very much focused on the Ethereum space. Where did Unibright fit in that, the development of Baseline, and how are you guys working with it going forward?
There are several touch points from Unibright's history that make a perfect fit to the current developments around Baseline. It's almost philosophical, so to say, but if you have this integrator's perspective, then you always have in your mind that you don't rely on one specific technology, but rather care about connecting what is there. And also, we talked about use cases before. Unibright never promoted that one single use case or that one single protocol. We always promoted Unibright to be something more on the high-level modeling side, that we can adapt to whatever blockchain technology comes out. And with Baseline, finally, some of the major concerns that enterprises have in getting their feet wet with blockchain technology have been addressed. Privacy and permission and public availability of a network. And so this makes perfect sense from our perspective. Our technology stack, like the Unibright framework, with the connecting of, say, an SAP system with a blockchain, this tech stack just remains the same, and we adjust on the end of it, now connecting to a Baseline protocol. So that's where it really makes sense for Unibright, because we have this integration perspective, and for the people in Baseline, it makes sense because we have that perspective to the off-chain world and to business processes. So it's a good match for all of them.
And perhaps one could add that we have this software architectural background, so we can help setting standards, or within EA, for example, we're working on defining standards, which is something that is not so common in the blockchain world, which has to be done in this still very young technology. So this is the other part where we give our input.
That's great. And standards that's a great point, because I think a lot of times people in this space are so focused on trying to create the most decentralized thing on earth. And so standards almost feel like centralization, but in reality, it just gives you structure to, to work with. And within enterprise, especially, personally, I think without standards, you'll have a really hard time getting these networks of different enterprise participants globally to actually work together. You'll have everyone using different protocols and different, APIs, and it's just it doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from an outsider perspective, if you look at only the blockchain protocol market or universum, you see, hundreds of possible blockchains for a company where to build on. I mean, this is where to start. This is
And because you're saying that standards themselves are a centralized concept, so to say, It always depends on the use case that a standard is for. So, for example, in the baseline environment, when we talk about zero knowledge proofs, there's also standards involved. And in the end, this standard tells every participant, let's agree on a standard where nobody I don't have to tell you my secret and you can keep your secret for you. So this is, they both agreed on a standard, but the standard helps both of them to protect their privacy. So this is also standardization. And in terms of baseline, it makes total sense.
I completely agree. And especially for enterprises, I think the goal should not just be to get enterprises to use blockchain in a closed environment exclusively. It should be to provide them the rails to get onto public networks, at least in some way. And I think that's really what the baseline protocol is tailor-made for.
Yeah, I mean, we had with the Unibright framework, we've been offering interfaces to both public and private blockchain protocols. But if you take a look at the big picture and you have a private blockchain, then in the end, it's just another state machine that is off-chain, so to say, because every private chain can be seen just like a centralized ERP system. So then you have to integrate this private chain with the public chain. So this is also something that's tackled with Baseline to finally have the major message bus between participants on a public, available, not restricted, open for everyone distributed ledger. Yeah. And this is, of course, the idea where this process reaches the highest level, to have at least one public available layer that everybody can access.
Yeah, that's one of the obvious main advantages of the Ethereum mainnet, for example, that you have this always on, trustworthy, let's call it magic bus that is able to connect all entities you can think of, maybe enterprises or private entities, whatever.
Yeah, no, it's powerful stuff. And I think people forget about the idea of finality and the trust that comes just from having your system of record be non-centrally controlled, because at least in the tech world that I live in, it's like you have these databases where there's always an admin, right? And no matter how much you trust that owner, there's always an opportunity for a hacker or that admin to change things or lock you out and all that sort of thing. So this is where the world's moving. It's exciting.
Yeah. To try to get Bitcoin running on a centralized database, it obviously can't work.
Yeah, that's not the same. Awesome. So going back to Unibright and your framework and the tools that you've built, to bridge that gap, like you said, between private and public blockchains, as well as blockchain and existing systems that enterprises have. Can you explain to folks that are watching that might not have that background, just at a high level, what your offering is?
Yeah, of course. So there's some basic methods that we at Unibright believe in. And it's that if somebody is a specialist in something, you should take his domain knowledge and just keep it there. We want to offer tools that allow business specialists to drive their business without becoming a developer themselves. So everything that Unibright builds tries to help the domain specialist, for example, a supply chain manager or somebody who's working at a bank, to stay at his domain, to use a nice graphical user interface to define processes. And everything that comes out of this, which is needed, for example, to run a smart contract in a blockchain or to connect an SAP system, should be generated automatically by software that acts deterministically every time the same. So you don't have to rely on that one specific developer you have to find on the market who's perhaps not available just on that day where you need him. That's the main idea behind everything that Unibright builds. We meet the business specialists at their level and take care of the technical stuff automatically.
I think that's powerful stuff because, again, in my experience in this space, I develop applications very much like what would probably come out of the Unibright's tools. And the tricky thing is always finding people to work with, right? Finding the developer talent to implement these things, but also the amount of time it takes to extract the domain knowledge and to extract the information about the problem you're trying to solve from those people. And so by, I think underneath the very clear surface level of what Unibright offers, that's one of the biggest things, is that you give the power to create the workflow that is encapsulated in the smart contract to the person who knows the problem the best. And I think that's underrated.
Yeah, and that's a modeling approach. We've been asked many times if the Unibright tech stack could be copied in some way, or if somebody has access to the code, or if he sees our UI, he can just copy it and build a Unibright competitor. But that's only the part that you have to do, and we are very good at that. We are doing it, but the magic is in finding the right level of modeling, so you don't have to do all the work over and over again. If you have a new client or a new industry or a new blockchain or a new ERP system, you don't want to start that whole thing from the very beginning every time again. And that's what Unibright is great at.
Absolutely. And again, going back to your offering, I think the thing that most people might not realize about implementing blockchain applications, whether you're doing it on the public mainnet or you have a private blockchain or multiple, the time that it takes to develop the contract, smart contracts plural, is probably the smallest lift out of the entire project. The biggest lift is figuring out the problem and doing the modeling like we just talked about. But the absolute largest effort and where all the money is spent is in integrations. And for me, integrations are what I spend most of my time on out of anything. And so go ahead.
Every tool you could with every tool you could use that helps you with that, you would be very happy in your daily work then.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And also, if you think about the pace of change, sometimes by the time you finish integrations for contracts that you've built, new versions have come out and they're breaking changes, and you need to now migrate your contracts and then maybe upgrade your integrations. It takes so long to do that sometimes. And that's why I'm really excited about Unibright's tools, because you guys have I think it's UB connector that helps you abstract out some of that integration work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, great to hear. And I mean, we absolutely made the same experiences as you just described. Like, you have this huge workload in the integration projects you have to do, and that's why we came up with all of this. And there are still some basic building blocks that appear in every business process, and those are again standards that we can already built on. So when you just over and over start from scratch, you are repeating things, and this is just not necessary. And this is where a lot of time gets wasted. So
and there's, if I might add, a common error in integration projects is you mentioned that if a part of the technology changes, and there are a lot of integration projects that refuse to decide on a common standard in their interaction, but they just adapt to the biggest player. So, for example, if you have SAP involved, and a big buyer tells all of their suppliers they should deliver their data in that specific format, and then the central ERP system would decide to change that standard, then everybody has to adapt. If they, at a formal level, decided on one common standard that both can integrate to, the work would be way easier. But this is work that comes on top when setting up a project. And many project managers perhaps just see the additional number of building a domain model. Oh, this costs like 8 days, so let's just skip it. And then with every breaking change in a technology, they pay for not paying these first 8 days over and over again. And being in the picture that blockchain is still very early, of course, it's not that we could state that there are great standards established over the last decades, because of course everything still changes, and tools like those from Unibright can help to come along with these changes and to not have to do everything from scratch.
Yeah, it's on my list of things to do, to try out the tools and to just see how it would fit into even my workflow to help make my job a lot easier, right? So that's hopefully there'll be a video.
What's your daily work?
My daily work, I do app development basically full time, and there's obviously some of the standard helping figure out business problems and modeling and doing all that stuff as well. But most of my work is hands-on code and architecture stuff as well. So this Unibright's right up my alley in terms of what you're all about and what the product is. It's right in my wheelhouse. So that's why I was so excited about it when I started reading and learning about what it's all about.
And then if you're also on the architectural level, then I guess you're also in the position that you yourself talk to the client and have to understand him on his domain level. That's something that computer scientists are often underestimated about. Everybody sees computer scientists as pure hackers, coders, or whatever. Yeah. But doing that mind twist to actually understand the world your client lives in is a very vital part, and that's why you need modeling.
Totally.
His language and getting into the tech stack. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so speaking of those clients, let's just take a scenario where an enterprise is ready to jump in and they want to use Unibright to accelerate their move to blockchain. The critical fuel for that is that UBT or Unibright token. That's like kind of the pay to play sort of token for the ecosystem. Can you explain to folks that are watching how that all works and how enterprises can pay for their services?
Yeah. The idea behind the token is a utility voucher system. Mm-hmm. So for an initial use of whatever component in the Unibright framework, you have to lock a certain amount of Unibright tokens in the framework. And from then you are allowed to reload your transaction number on a monthly base, for example, with fiat money or crypto or whatever. So it's not an ongoing payment model, but it's an entry model to get into the system. Yeah. And speaking of the complexity, we've been asked this many times before. It's way harder. 99% of the process convincing a client making use of blockchain technology is making him understand blockchain. And then if he got that, explaining him that for the first month he needs to lock in some UBT is very easy. So the ratio is still trying to convince companies of the benefits of blockchain. That's also why we established these workshops and so on. This is the harder part. And then using UBT is quite easy, actually.
And from a business perspective, of course, using the token just makes it a lot easier for us. So we don't have to do any initial invoicing or have to deal with some foreign exchange rates or so on. We have this voucher we can use for our services or for the workshops, and it's some common ground we can build on. And we can even do things like automatic billing or counting when we say one token is worth one transaction between some systems. So it's quite logical and easy to use in this. If we are already using blockchain, then it makes sense to use a blockchain token here.
It's universal from our perspective. When we offer blockchain agnostic services, then we can bundle up very much of the, say, transaction cost of a specific protocol in our UBT. And this is, again, one example where we abstract from a specific technological problem. If the client says, I want to use another blockchain, then we would have to explain him, you need another wallet, you need another gas transaction costs, whatever. He doesn't have to care about this because we can all count it in the transaction cost in UBT and then cover it for him.
Got it. So it's basically like you sort of lock in up front based on your level of usage and the services that you're going to want, your transaction throughput, those types of things. And then on a rolling basis, you continue to, there's like a rebuy process every X number of days or months?
Yeah. We are eagerly waiting for the point where we can tell you the experience of thousands of customers on this. But right now, it's just, in every case, it's different. Some of them decided to log in a quite large amount of tokens that gets them on their POC level, perhaps through 1 year. Yeah. And others just decide to log in a smaller amount of tokens and they renew it every 30 days per fiat. So we're still very, we can adapt to what the client wants at this early level. Yeah. And it will be exciting to tell where the majority is heading towards when we have more experience in the blockchain field.
Yeah. Fantastic. And so for a person who's sitting, on the other side of the screen now, that's thinking, I really like Unibright. I think this is a powerful piece of technology and a framework. what does the Unibright token mean for them? If you're an average person, you don't plan on using the tech per se, but you want to invest in the token. Like, what is that? Is it kind of like an investment in the ecosystem itself?
No, I mean, we've been very clear on this during this token sale. Mm-hmm. It is a utility token for a B2B usage. Yep. So the token should be used by those who want to use our products to log them in. Mm-hmm. And those who own the token and do not want to use them in the software stack, they can give them or sell them to people who want to use it. That's the complete model. Awesome. And everything in between is not the scope of the utility token.
It's somehow comparable perhaps to Ethereum, where, I mean, the main use of Ether is have it as gas for transactions, so using the utility that Ethereum offers. Yep. So the same with us, it's just the ticket to use what we offer. So,
but what we can tell, the token model is structured in a way that it incentivizes early adopters on a new technology to have a very easy entrance into the system, and incentivizing larger players to go for long-time contracts where they can go for a medium price within the platform at a higher level. So this already played out very well. Last year, it was most of the times it was smaller proof of concept things. And now with Baseline and the EA stuff, also the big enterprises come into the field and they get interested in integration. So it makes sense if you take a look at the complete development of the project. Yeah.
Awesome. And I'm glad that we got to address this, because I think, I'm all for speculation. I'm all for the idea that, you want to be a part of projects that you're passionate about, but really keeping it focused on the utility and what the token is all about, I think is the healthiest thing for not just you, but for everybody,
Yeah, absolutely. So all the values grow with more utility or more verticals that we offer. I mean, the token it gets worth more when we add more utility. That's why we work on the utility, and everything else follows. I mean,
and that is something that actually changed, that you put it that way so directly. We love to hear that, because we decided very early on Unibright that we focus on building software, and that we focus on enlarging the utility the token stands for. And not everybody agrees with this strategy, because there are also crypto projects that are more on a speculative level, perhaps. But we think in the long run, it's just the best to keep on building, to provide high-level software, to do the real thing, even if it takes a little bit longer. It just makes sense, specifically because integration projects, once they're up and running, they run for years. So if you take that hurdle of integrating a complicated process, then you will not change it like 1 week after, but you are happy if it just runs and runs and runs. And this is what we also aim for.
That's why I wear this Unibright build t-shirt today.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, you gotta be clear about the brand and what it really means.
Yeah, awesome. And it's easier to tell that story the more you do. So it's also in our favor if we show the world, like we did very fast with our publicly accessible Unibright demo. We were one of the first projects that actually delivered functional software earlier than promised. Mm-hmm. And this is something that we always have in mind, to keep adding new value to the product stack.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So this will be my call to action for this video for folks that are watching. If you believe in Unibright and you like what you've been hearing, if you're watching, you probably know about the project at least somewhat. You take advantage of the tools that they've created and continue to develop with, that give people who might not come from a technical background the ability to approach solutions to these problems. If you have Unibright tokens, use them. Try it out.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the best way to help the project, is to keep using products and then shout out and say, hey, I've noticed a bug, or hey, this could be better. That's how good quality software is built.
Yeah. Exactly. 100%.
Awesome. And I think that's about as good of a note as any to end on it. I wanted to really quickly, though, before we do, give you guys a chance really quickly to just tell folks where they can find you specifically and Unibright, social media, website, anything you want to promote.
Yeah, of course, at first there's Unibright.io, our website, and then there's our blog. And I mean, on the blog, we have all the things that are going on, the demo that is coming on next week, and all the great things to follow. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's a Telegram community that is greatly managed by our community managers. It's always fun to be there, so you can find the link on the website as well. And of course, there's social channels like Twitter and Facebook that just follow, but I would stick to the blog and the Telegram group perhaps.
Awesome. Sounds good. Yeah, I'm in the Telegram. I would highly recommend it. There's lots of good knowledge in there, especially if you're going to start tinkering with Unibright. Great place to ask questions. Awesome. Well, Marten, Stefan, thanks so much for being here. And we'll definitely do this again as there's plenty more to talk about with Unibright.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Great interview.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers, everyone.